Joining us on our couch on this Monday morning is Steve Mabona from the Gauteng Education Department. We try to unpack with him this morning the process of vetting teachers to ensure we don't end up with this kind of situations like has happened in Parktown Boy High. Steve, good morning. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning, Pretty.
Morning, Steve. And I suppose, yes, this story has raised the alarm, I think, more than any other story before. And we've had several cases. I mean, it's not the first time we've had teachers who are accused of treating or ill-treating or abusing kids this way. What has it taught you as a department? How do we actually know who's in the classroom, who's around our children? How do we know who these people are? How do you know?
Definitely quite an eye-opener on the other level, but we are saying we've been doing screening of teachers, you know, take them through the verification process. As you will know that the South African Educators Council is working very closely with us because we don't, you know, take in a teacher who does not have that certificate. And they also, you know, conduct the verification process and make sure that they go through, you know, screening. They don't, you know, actually certify people who might have been having criminal records or who are on the, you know, lists of, you know, those people who abuse children, you know, sexual offenders. So we're working very closely with them, and there's an assurance actually that they have started vigorously enhancing their program, and they're actually looking at even coming in our space to say those teachers that are already in our system, can't they go through the process of verification and making sure that they're in those sexual, you know, offense lists. As you will know that working with Department of Justice and Social Development, we also go through the process of accessing those lists. Though there was a little bit of a challenge.
There was a problem where you didn't have easy access.
Yes, but we are actually tidying up, you know, our screws on that one.
Steve, just drill a little bit deeper into this. Whose responsibility is it at the end of the day to ensure that a school, a particular school, has got the right kind of teachers? I would imagine that as a department, you set the guidelines, the oversight role and all of that. You put certain mechanisms or frameworks into place. And I would think maybe the school itself has some responsibility.
Look, we can't do it on our own. We work very closely with the South African Council of Educators. We also work with the Education Relation Council. That's where they take a lot of decisions in terms of, you know, how you remunerate educators, how do we employ them. To an extent that we had a challenge of going into the criminal records, you know, just to verify that, because they said, but you can't go there because we are not employed by, you know, your Public Service Act, but by, you know, Educators Act. So we are actually making inroads to say, but then we need to go deeper and make sure that we do thorough checks and go through the criminal records and make sure that we have teachers that we really must have in our system.
But Steve, and you know, to sort of find out that this wasn't just one person, which is where we started. It turned out that many other teachers might be also involved in this now, having done the same thing. And I think the question for everyone is, why is it that not a single child could have or did actually say something much earlier on? What is the culture? What is the fear? And is it not time maybe to sort of have an awareness drive, to go around to schools and say, is there something you need to tell us? Say that to the pupils, because obviously there was an element of fear in this case.
Definitely. The culture of silence has been, you know, in existence for quite some time now. Some will say this is historic, but we are saying if there's a criminal element, you need to report it. And hence the MECF decided to appoint a task team. We'll be visiting, most especially your boys, you know, schools, because we see, you know, an element of that silence. They say, you know, they're raising boys, but we feel that these are children. If one is abused, if one is assaulted, if one is, you know, harassed or bullied, because we said, you know, our safety, you know, safety of our learners is our priority. That's why we have, you know, safety measure policy in all the schools. They need to implement those the policy to say, if a child complains, this is what we are doing as a school. And the principal has a responsibility to make sure that his counterparts work with him or her to make sure that we don't have such cases.
Now, Steve, very briefly before you leave, Was it last week we interviewed Dr. Signolo from Brussels, Education International?
Yes,
there was a conference of educationists in South Africa about the teaching profession in Africa, that currently you're not attracting. The teaching profession is not attracting teachers. People just get in there because it's a job. Part of the problem, I would guess, is that you're going to have to make sure in the long term that the profession becomes very attractive and it's the right kind of person who gets in the system.
Definitely. I mean, we're working tirelessly just to make sure that, because when MEC visited, like for instance, Singapore, I mean, there, a teacher is prioritized. And even when you look at your remuneration, because, I mean, you can't want to come into the system because you are not employed, you just want to finish. I mean, teachers should be actually the best paid in the country because they make us, So when they are in the classroom, they should passionately be there, don't worry about remuneration, but push their passion, That's what we are saying as a country, to say, look, we need to consider, looking at the remuneration of teachers, because once you pay them well, then some of these elements will then, diminish. But the conduct of a teacher is quite paramount. You don't need to forget where you are. You need to also understand that you are a parent before you are a teacher.
Thank you very much. Steve Mabona from the Gauteng Department of Education.